How did The Simpsons predict the assassination attempt on Trump, Ukraine, and the chaos in Russia? What has actually come true? And what should we expect this year? And believe me, this is even crazier than Vanga, and the most insane part is at the end. Why do people even listen to The Simpsons? They predicted September 11th and the destruction of the towers several years before it happened. In 1998, in the episode Simpsons on a Ship, they mentioned the Ebola fever. And what do you think happened? In 2014, it once again became a global threat, claiming hundreds of thousands of lives. And what about the pandemic? In 1993, in the episode Marge in Chains, a virus arrived in Springfield from China, causing mass casualties. There was also a quarantine, everyone wore masks, and people got infected from bats, which was even mocked in the show itself as complete nonsense. Doesn't that remind you of anything? Or take a look at Lisa Simpson in 2001. She appears as a future president wearing a purple coat and a pearl necklace, exactly like Kamala Harris at the inauguration in 2021. Or here's one from more recent tragedies. Do you remember that creepy story when the submersible with billionaires sank near the Titanic? On June 18th, just an hour and a half after diving, the Titan suddenly disappeared from the radar. On board were 5 ultra-wealthy people who decided to see the legendary ship with their own eyes, but their expensive excursion turned into a nightmare. There are so many questions. What exactly happened? What did they feel in their final moments? What were they thinking about? But the strangest thing is this scenario has already been played out. Guess where? In The Simpsons. In a 2006 episode, Homer and Bart also go to the Titanic, stumble upon chests of treasure, and after losing oxygen, Homer miraculously wakes up in the hospital. Coincidence? I don't think so. And now let's add Mike Rice, a Simpsons writer who went down to the Titanic 3 times in the Ocean Gate submersible and lost contact every time. He even joked back then that sooner or later a real tragedy would happen. So, who's the prophet here? Or what about their predictions? In 2013, The Simpsons touched on a topic that sounded like science fiction. What would happen if humanity seriously started studying black holes? And of course, they set all of this for 2024, 2025. Back then, it seemed like a distant future to many, but now everything looks completely different. The recent satellite launch in India could be the first step towards studying black holes, which were previously considered almost inaccessible to researchers. It sounds exciting, but immediately the question arises, what if we find out too much there? Black holes are not only a source of knowledge, but also a potential threat. They can consume everything in their path, including our planet. I hope, of course, it won't come to that, but the very fact that the Simpsons were right again makes you think. Scary? Of course, but that's just the beginning. Next up are predictions that might really shock you. Ready? Let's go! Here's a more hard-hitting hint, for example. In the 25th season of The Simpsons, there's an episode where a map of the USSR appears, expanded to include all 15 former republics, as well as Norway, Finland, and Sweden. A joke? Satire? Maybe. But what if it's not just a gag? You might say, well, it's just a map. What's there to worry about? But there's one interesting detail here. Inspector Chalmers mentions the 79th run around the school. And what do you think? It coincides with the 79th session of the UN General Assembly, where the risk of World War III was discussed. And yes, that session took place at the end of 2024. A coincidence? Well, again, I don't think so. But considering how the creators of The Simpsons love to embed hidden meanings and hints, it does make you think. Especially since in one episode, we see 2 predictions at once. And since I started talking about World War III, in November 1987, when The Simpsons were just starting out, they released a short film called World War III. It was a dark episode where Homer Simpson tries to prepare his family for World War III by staging nighttime drills and simulating bomb drops. Back then, it seemed like pure satire, but today, decades later, the world really hasn't become any safer. The current global situation is extremely tense. The war between Russia and Ukraine, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in Syria, internal conflicts in Myanmar and Sudan, the civil war in Somalia, the war on drugs in Mexico is just a small part of a much larger list. Thousands of lives are lost every year, if not every day. And the tension between the world's major powers, the US, Russia, China, and North Korea, continues to grow. Many experts believe that the world is already on the brink of a large-scale war. And in this context, World War III from The Simpsons looks not just like grim satire, but a real warning to future generations. But what should you do if war does break out? The Simpsons have answers to that as well. In the same episode, Homer builds a bunker, stocks up on food, and tries to protect his family. Maybe we too should think about how to prepare for the worst? But let's talk a little about politics as well. So, who will come after Donald Trump? His victory in the 2016 election is one of the most famous predictions made by The Simpsons. But his political career isn't the only topic the animated series has predicted. In the episode Treehouse of Horror 27, which aired in that same 2016, viewers could spot a funny detail. Homer is wearing a badge that says Ivanka 2028. At first glance, this seems like typical satire, but just 2 years later, this moment would take on a whole new meaning. In 2018, Ivanka Trump actually gave an interview in which she stated that she did not rule out the possibility of running for president of the United States. Moreover, she emphasized that she would like to become the first female president, and that her ambitions go far beyond the role of advisor in her father's administration. This statement sparked a lot of discussion, and in political circles, people began to seriously talk about her possible participation in the elections. In fact, long before that, conversations about Ivanka's political future had already been circulating in the media. In 2017, a poll was conducted showing that 44% of Americans viewed her positively, making her one of the most popular figures in Trump's inner circle. Some Republicans even suggested that she could become her father's full-fledged successor. And yes, after a second election, many predict that Trump will hold power for a decade, and the family dynasty fits perfectly into this scenario. By the way, I forgot to mention Trump's second term. Interestingly enough, The Simpsons already hinted at this back in 2015. In the episode Back to the Future, Homer falls from the sky, and in the background there's a poster that says Trump 2024. How could the creators have foreseen this? How could you accidentally guess something like that? Or maybe they have access to a time machine? I don't know. And if that's not enough, just remember another episode from 2001 where Lisa, as president, mentions that her predecessor was Donald Trump. And what do you think happened? In 2017, he actually became president. To predict the same event twice in a row, that's too much. Even for probability theory. But that's not all. Next, there will be predictions that might scare you even more. But for now, here's another bullseye. In the 9th episode of the second season, which aired way back in 1990, Marge faces the issue of censorship. The residents of Springfield suddenly decide that Michelangelo's famous statue David is too nude and demand that it be covered up. In the end, to calm everyone down, poor David simply gets a pair of jeans put on him. It's funny, but this actually happened in real life too. In 2016, debates flared up in St. Petersburg over a replica of this sculpture. There were suggestions to either cover it up or remove it altogether. And in 2023, a school in Florida even deemed David too nude, sparking an international scandal. As a result, the mayor personally invited the American principal to come and see for themselves that it really is art. And in 2025, all these debates are still ongoing around the world. Technological progress is relentlessly moving forward, and we are getting ever closer to a world that resembles the plot of The Simpsons. In the 2012 episode Oh No, Robots, Mr. Burns, wanting to cut costs, decides to replace all the employees at the nuclear power plant with robots. This leads to a catastrophic level of unemployment. In Springfield, 99% of people are simply left without jobs. The only person left at the plant is Homer, who soon discovers that the machines possess intelligence similar to that of humans. Things get more complicated when the robots go out of control and start a rebellion. At first glance, this seems like a typical science fiction plot, but in reality, automation is already being actively implemented in many fields. For example, McDonald's is testing voice ordering systems and robots capable of making French fries. In 2023, the restaurant chain White Castle installed the Flippy Robot Fryer, which not only fries potatoes but also nuggets, and does it much faster and more efficiently than a human. And what can we say about large factories that already assemble cars on their own? In California, fast food restaurants are using automated kiosks that completely replace staff. But robotization is not limited to the food service industry. In China, they are already testing driverless taxis, And in Japan, stores are opening where robots, together with AI-powered cameras, record purchases themselves. In 2023, major car manufacturers such as Tesla and Honda unveiled their humanoid robots, capable of performing physical labor at factories, completely replacing humans. Experts predict that by 2030, automation could replace up to 800 million jobs worldwide. And what about total surveillance? The Simpsons movie in 2007 literally drew our future. Remember the scene where Marge brushes off Lisa, who is worried that they're being listened to. And then the camera takes us to the NSA office, where agents are actually listening to their conversation. Irony? Yes. But reality can sometimes be even worse. In 2013, Edward Snowden, a former CIA employee, revealed shocking facts about NSA surveillance programs like PRISM. It turns out that the government can access user data from the largest IT companies. A global scandal debates about privacy, citizens' rights, and the limits of government control of this has become our reality. And here, the Simpsons turned out to be prophets once again. They didn't just make a joke. They raised an issue that only became relevant years later. So maybe it's worth revisiting that moment and asking ourselves, who is listening to us now? Yes, and the jokes about Lisa, about the camera inside her, and the comrade major monitoring her are now more relevant than ever. And what do you think about conspiracy predictions? In one of the most fantastical episodes of The Simpsons, which aired in 1996, there's an interesting moment. In the short Citizen Kang from the episode Treehouse of Horror 7, Homer discovers that the presidential candidates Bill Clinton and Bob Dole are actually aliens who have replaced the real politicians in order to seize power in the US and then in the whole world. Funny? Yes, but this absurd idea strangely echoes conspiracy theories that claim reptilians have long been hiding among ordinary people in America. For example, David Icke, a British conspiracy theory enthusiast, actively promotes the idea that reptilians are ruling the entire world right now. According to him, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and even the Queen of England are humanoid reptiles. And now, science is adding fuel to the fire. In the 1960s, the theory of the reptilian brain emerged as a part of our brain responsible for instincts. Conspiracy theorists immediately jumped on this. See, we are all descendants of reptiles, which means we are controlled by them as well. So maybe the Simpsons weren't just joking, but actually knew something we don't? Yeah, so many questions. And here's another coincidence that will melt your brain. In the second episode of the 10th season of The Simpsons, which aired way back in 1998, Homer decides to follow in the footsteps of Thomas Edison and become a great inventor. In one of the scenes, he writes some strange equation on the board. At first, it seems like just a random set of numbers, but it's not. The British science writer Simon Singh discovered that this complex mathematical expression almost exactly predicts the mass of the Higgs boson, the very one that scientists only discovered in 2012. The margin of error is literally tiny. So it turns out that Homer knew what physicists were yet to prove, 14 years before the official discovery. So who's the real genius here? And of course, what would it be without ecology? The Simpsons movie, which came out in 2007, isn't just a funny cartoon, but a true environmental manifesto. Homer Simpson, as always, puts his own desires above common sense and pollutes Springfield Lake with pig waste. Well, why not? Someone's got to do it, right? As a result, the city is covered with a giant glass dome so the toxins don't spread across the country. Science fiction? Yes, but, as is often the case with The Simpsons, it's not that far from reality. Remember Flint, Michigan, where negligence led to the water being poisoned with lead. This is no laughing matter, these are real consequences of neglecting the environment. And in the cartoon, the president, and what a twist, is none other than Arnold Schwarzenegger, who by the way in real life as governor of California, actively fought for environmental protection. Irony? Perhaps? But this character highlights how important it is to have people in power who are ready to tackle environmental issues. Speaking of Schwarzenegger, by law, he couldn't become president of the United States, since he wasn't born in America. But who knows, maybe one day the laws will change and we'll see him in the Oval Office. But honestly, only after Ivanka Trump, although by then, he'll probably be over 90. And now, let's talk about the technologies of the future. Flying cars, the dream of scientists, engineers, and screenwriters regularly appear in movies and books. And of course, The Simpsons couldn't pass that up. In the 2005 episode Future-Drama, Homer decides that ordinary spending is boring and blows all the family's money not only on an underwater house, but also on developing a flying car. And in the fictional year 2013, he's already soaring through the skies with Bart. Meanwhile, we're still stuck in traffic jams. Or maybe not. In reality, the air transport industry is developing at full speed. Uber dreamed of launching a flying taxi as early as 2020. And in 2018, Larry Page unveiled the City Hawk Flyer prototype. But here's the problem. Battery technology still doesn't allow for long-distance flights, and air traffic needs to be organized somehow. But there are already cars capable of staying in the air for several hours. In one of the episodes of The Simpsons called Bar to the Future, Homer and Marge don't just have fun in virtual reality, they literally immerse themselves in it completely. Special glasses and tubes allow them not only to see the digital world, but also to taste virtual food at the same time. Science fiction? At first glance, yes. But in reality, scientists are already hard at work trying to bring this concept to life. Back in 2013, researchers from the National University of Singapore introduced a device capable of stimulating taste sensations using electrical and thermal impulses. In other words, no real food, just signals transmitted directly to your tongue. Craving something sweet? No problem, your brain will already believe you're eating a piece of chocolate, even though you're just holding wires in your hands. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, they've already taken the next step. There, the first virtual reality restaurant has opened. Visitors put on VR headsets, immerse themselves in a digitally created atmosphere, and experience the taste of food even if there's nothing on their plate. Interestingly, researchers from Cornell University discovered that if you eat cheese in a pleasant virtual environment, it actually tastes much better. Apparently, the brain not only believes in digital food, but also knows how to make it seem even more appealing. But who among us hasn't dreamed of teleportation? Only in reality, things aren't as simple as they are in The Simpsons. In the episode Treehouse of Horror 8, Homer, like a true innovator, turns into a flyman. Funny? Yes. But behind this comedy lies some quite serious scientific ideas. Quantum entanglement, for example, already makes it possible to teleport photons over vast distances. Experiments in 2017 proved that this is, in principle, possible. But when it comes to teleporting a human, things get much more complicated. Scientists from the University of Leicester calculated that transmitting data about the human body would require an incredible amount of information. We're talking about numbers that are hard to even imagine, like the fine YouTube received from the Russian Federation. So for now, teleportation of atoms and molecules, let alone entire organisms, remain science fiction, but who knows? So, are you ready for predictions about the collapse of the USA? The Simpsons are at it again. In 2011, in an episode about the future, Lisa can't use the teleporter or get pregnant. But before her, two passengers teleport without any problems, and one of them heads to the independent Republic of Texas. A joke? But no, social media users see this as a prediction. In January of last year, the Texas National Guard took control of a section of the border with Mexico, blocking access for federal border agents. President Biden threatened strict measures, but the governor of Texas was supported by 25 states. Tensions were rising. And here's what's interesting. Only Texas, by law, has the right to secede from the United States. So maybe the Simpsons were right again? Whether Texas will become independent in the future is still unknown, but if it happens again, I'll just have to tip my hat. In March 2016, The Simpsons released an episode called The Margian Chronicles, where they introduced viewers to the fantastic concept of colonizing Mars. In this episode, Homer and his family take part in a program that, as it later turns out, is actually a scam. However, despite all the difficulties, Marge and Lisa still managed to reach Mars, though only in their imagination. According to the plot, this was supposed to happen in the year 51. But let's shift to reality. Elon Musk and his company SpaceX have long been working on ambitious plans to colonize Mars. Musk has repeatedly stated that the first crewed mission to the Red Planet could launch as early as 2026 or 2027. And yes, he now has access to enormous funding and is part of the US government. Musk is actively developing the Starship rocket, which according to his vision will be the key to interplanetary travel. He envisions a future where Mars becomes a second home for humanity with cities, infrastructure, and perhaps even its own Martian culture. For now, this still sounds like science fiction, but almost everything Musk does sounds like science fiction, yet in the end he makes it happen. And here is where the real magic of technology comes in. In the 34th season of The Simpsons, Bart receives a hologram invitation to a party. Just a couple of years ago, this seemed like pure fantasy, but now reality is catching up with the cartoon. The company HoloConX is developing a product called Holobot. It's something like a phone booth that allows you to display full-size holograms of the people you're talking to. Imagine calling a friend and they appear right in front of you as a hologram as if they're standing next to you. It sounds like a scene from Star Wars, but this is already real life. This technology promises to make video calls so realistic that conversations will feel natural, even if the person you're talking to is on another continent. All you need is electricity and the internet. Whether holograms will become part of our everyday lives this year remains an open question, but technology is advancing rapidly, and what seemed impossible just yesterday is now on the verge of becoming reality, and it doesn't even cost a fortune. But let's talk about sports. In the 10th season of The Simpsons, which aired back in 1999, there's an episode called The Old Man and the Sea Student, where one of the characters, a representative from France, claims that Paris would be the perfect venue for the 2024 Olympic Games. The scene ends in true Simpsons fashion. The Frenchman, in a burst of passion, comically splashes wine in the chairman's face. But what do you think? A quarter of a century later, this prediction comes true. The 2024 Summer Olympic Games really did take place in Paris, from July 26th to August 11th. How did the creators of The Simpsons manage to predict this 25 years before it happened? It just seems unbelievable. And here's another cool technology that was predicted in a cartoon. In the final episode of the 3rd season of The Simpsons titled Brother, Can You Spare 2 Dimes?, Herb, Homer's half-brother, creates a device that translates baby babble into understandable speech. Herb, who had previously lost his fortune, borrows $2,000 from Homer to develop this product, and as it turned out, it was a very profitable investment. Now, let's move to reality. A company called Zondrum is already working on technology that will allow parents and pediatricians to understand exactly what a baby who, of course, can't speak yet feels or wants. Their approach involves using non-invasive monitoring systems and artificial intelligence to analyze infant speech. Of course, the internet is full of apps that promise to interpret baby babble, cat meows, dog barks, and sparrow chirps, but most of them fail to live up to expectations. However, Zondrum claims that their technology will work much more accurately thanks to an innovative system based on sounds. Or take the 19th episode of the 6th season, Lisa's wedding. The main character goes to London, and in the background there's a skyscraper that looks suspiciously like the Shard. Coincidence? Maybe. But here's what's interesting. This glass giant was conceived only in 2000 by the architect Recep Jano, the same one who created the Pompidou Center in Paris, and it was built from 2007 to 2012. And that would be nothing special, except the episode aired all the way back in 1995. There wasn't even a thought or a plan for the shot anywhere. How they managed to guess the shape and almost the exact location remains a mystery. I feel like there must be some kind of machine that can send the creators of The Simpsons into the future. And now, I suggest we finish with Apple technologies. Last year, the world saw a revolutionary product from Apple, the Vision Pro virtual reality headset, which allows users to immerse themselves in ultra-realistic virtual worlds. But should we really be surprised? After all, The Simpsons already hinted at this kind of technological development. Back in 2016 in the episode Friends and Family, Mr. Burns used a prototype VR headset so that Marge, Bart, Lisa and Maggie could play the role of a perfect family. This technology is strikingly similar to the Vision Pro, even just visually. When the headset became available in Springfield, real chaos broke out. People were tripping over real objects while being immersed in the virtual world. Now, with the Vision Pro released on the market, we're seeing a similar scenario play out in real life. Apple even had to restrict the use of the headset while moving to prevent such incidents. How did The Simpsons manage to predict this 6 years before the announcement? It's simply incomprehensible. Moreover, MetaQuest 3 and 3S headsets have already been released, which cost almost 5 times less than Apple's product and are available to all users. But they also restrict people so that they cannot move around in them. Even though the headset has a built-in camera and can easily see everything happening around, but it's just plain dangerous. Well, that's all for now, friends. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. Be sure to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. I'm relaunching this channel and there will be lots and lots of interesting things coming soon. See you soon!